Arthur Conan Doyle, The Adventure of the Three Gables. I do not think that any of my adventures with Sherlock Holmes began quite so abruptly or so melodramatically as the one associated with the villa known as the Three Gables. I had not seen Holmes for several days and had no idea what new channel his energy was taking. On that particular morning, my friend was clearly in a communicative mood, but he had hardly settled me into the worn armchair by the fire and placed himself opposite with his pipe in his mouth when a visitor arrived. To say that he rushed in like a mad bull would be the most accurate description. The door flew open, and a huge Negro burst into the room. Had he not looked so formidable, he might have been called comical, wearing a loud, check suit of gray and a flamboyant orange-pink tie. His broad face, with its flattened nose, leaned forward, while his fierce, dark eyes, burning with hidden threat, darted from one of us to the other. "Which of you is Sherlock Holmes, gentlemen?" he demanded. My friend gave a thin smile and raised his pipe. "Ah, so it is you," said our visitor, moving around the table with a stealthy, menacing stride. "Listen here, Massa Holmes, don't go poking your nose into other people's business. Let the folk in Harrow mind their own affairs. Do you get me, Massa Holmes?" "Pray do go on," my friend exclaimed. "This is most interesting." "Interesting, is it?" the fierce stranger nearly shouted. "If I have to mark you up a bit, you won't find it quite so interesting, I promise you. I've handled types like you before, and they didn't look much to look at when I was finished. Just you have a look at this, Massa Holmes." He flourished an enormous fist like a jagged piece of rock, right under the famous detective's nose. Holmes examined the clenched fist with an air of clinical interest. Perhaps it was Holmes's icy calm, or perhaps it was the sound I made as I picked up the fire poker, but our guest became somewhat more civil. "Well then, I've given you fair warning," he said. "There are people I know who are very, and I mean very, keen to see the back of your interference. Do you follow me? I'm not your master, but you aren't mine either. If you go meddling, I'll be close by. Remember that. I've been wanting to have a chat with you for some time," Holmes said. "I won't ask you to sit down, for I don't find you particularly pleasant. You are Steve Dixie, the former professional boxer, are you not?" "That's me, Steve Dixie, and Massa Holmes will feel it on his own skin if he tries any of his clever tricks on me. But it's your skin, not your brains, that you use the most," my friend replied, looking steadily at the visitor. "Perhaps we should instead have a talk about the murder of young Perkins outside the Holborn bar?" The man recoiled, and his face turned a sickly gray. "I won't have such talk," he said. "What have I to do with Perkins, Massa Holmes? I was in Birmingham. I was training at the bull ring when that lad got into trouble. That is enough. You may go. You cannot hide from me. I shall find you whenever I need you. Good day to you, Massa Holmes. I hope there's no hard feelings about this visit." "There might be, unless you tell me who sent you here. There's no secret in that, Massa Holmes. It was Barney Stockdale." "And whose tune was Stockdale dancing to?" "I swear I don't know, Massa Holmes. He just said, 'Steve, go and see Sherlock Holmes and tell him, if he sets foot in Harrow, his life won't be worth a farthing.' That's the honest truth." Without waiting for further questions, our visitor rushed out of the room. Holmes gave a quiet chuckle and knocked the ash from his pipe. "Fortunately, Watson, you did not have to test the thickness of his none too intelligent skull. I did not miss your maneuvers with the fire poker. But in truth, Dixie is a rather harmless fellow. He is merely a foolish, boastful child with the strength of a giant. Did you notice how easily he was subdued? He belongs to Spencer John's gang and is entangled in their latest dark dealings. which I intend to expose. Steve Dixie is commanded directly by Barney Stockdale, a much craftier individual. Their specialty is intimidation and assault. I find myself wondering who is standing behind them in this particular instance. But why did they decide to threaten you? The reason lies in a certain occurrence in Harrow, and today's visit compels me to pay it special attention. After all, if someone is this anxious, the matter must be quite intriguing. And what exactly happened there? I was just about to tell you when we were interrupted by that ridiculous farce. A Mrs. Maberley of Harrow sent this letter. If you are willing to keep me company, we shall send her a reply by telegraph and set off at once. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I have encountered a chain of inexplicable events concerning my house. I should be most grateful for your advice. I shall expect you tomorrow at any time. The villa is situated just a few minutes' journey from Weald Station. My late husband, Mortimer Maberley, was, I believe, one of your early clients. Respectfully yours, Mary Maberley." The return address was the Three Gables, Harrow Weald. "So, that is the situation," Holmes remarked. "A short journey by rail, followed by an even shorter drive, brought us before a structure of brick and wood, a villa surrounded by a green lawn. Plaster carvings above the upper-story windows were a feeble attempt to justify the house's name. In the background stood a depressing grove of stunted pines. On the whole, the place looked drab and left a somber impression. Inside, however, the house was furnished with taste, and the elderly lady who met us was charming, bearing the mark of true high culture. "I remember your husband well, madam," Holmes began, "though many years have passed since he sought my services in a rather trifling matter. Perhaps you are better acquainted with the name of my son, Douglas?" Holmes looked at our hostess with increased interest. "Indeed. So, you are the mother of Douglas Maberley?" I cannot say I was among his close friends, but like any Londoner, I heard much about him. A most remarkable personality. "And where is he now?" "He is dead, Mr. Holmes. Douglas is dead. He was appointed as an attaché to our embassy in Rome. Last month, he passed away there from pneumonia. I am so sorry. It is hard to believe that death has power over such people. I have never met a more active or energetic man. He lived in constant tension. He never spared himself." "Precisely, sir. That was his undoing. I remember him as he was, the very soul of cheerfulness and nobility. Few live to see the morose, gloomy, and preoccupied creature my son became. In a single month, right before my eyes, a thoughtful and respectful boy turned into a weary cynic. Unhappy love? A woman. A demon, more likely. However, Mr. Holmes, I did not invite you here to discuss my late son. Dr. Watson and I are happy to assist you in any way we can. Strange things have been happening here lately. It has been over a year since I moved into this villa. I live a secluded life, hardly speaking with the neighbors. But 3 days ago, I was visited by a man calling himself a real estate agent. He informed me that my house was exactly what one of his clients required. This client was prepared to pay a vast sum if I agreed to surrender the Three Gables. The offer seemed strange, as there are several perfectly good villas for sale nearby, but naturally, it could not fail to interest me. I set a price £500 higher than what I had paid myself. The man did not even haggle. He merely stated that his client wished to purchase the furnishings as well. Some of the furniture has been with us since the old days, but as you can see, it is all in good condition. Thus, I named a very substantial figure. To this, they also agreed immediately. I have long wished to travel, and the deal was so profitable that it would have allowed me to remain independent for the rest of my days. Yesterday, the agent arrived with a prepared contract. Fortunately, I showed the document to Mr. Sutro, my lawyer who lives here in Harrow. He told me, "The contract is highly unusual. If you sign this, you will not be able to legally remove a single item from the house, not even your personal belongings." When the agent returned this evening, I pointed out this oddity and added that I had only intended to sell the furniture. No, it must be everything," he insisted. "But what about my clothes? My jewelry? Some exceptions will be made for personal items. However, nothing may be removed from the house without a prior inspection. My client is quite wealthy and generous, but he has certain whims and his own way of conducting business. His condition is all or nothing." "Then it shall be nothing," I replied. And that was that. However, the incident seemed so unusual to me that I decided. At that moment, Mrs. Maberley's story was suddenly interrupted. Holmes gestured for silence, then cautiously crossed the room. With a sudden jerk, he flung the door open and dragged in a tall, thin woman whom he had caught by the shoulder. She struggled clumsily, like a large, awkward chicken protesting as it is plucked from its coop. "Let me go. What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. "Susan, what is the meaning of this?" her mistress asked in surprise. "You see, madam, I was just coming in to ask if the guests were staying for lunch. And then this gentleman suddenly grabbed me. I heard someone behind that door 5 minutes ago," Holmes remarked. "I simply didn't want to interrupt a fascinating story. Do you suffer from asthma, Susan? You breathe far too loudly for this kind of work." The woman turned a face full of anger and astonishment toward Holmes, who still held her captive. "Who are you? What right do you have to manhandle people like this?" "I simply wanted to ask your mistress a question in your presence." "Mrs. Maberley, did you tell anyone of your intention to seek my advice?" "No, Mr. Holmes, no one." "And who posted the letter?" "Susan did." "I see. Then tell us, Susan, to whom did you report that your mistress was seeking my help?" "That's a lie. I did no such thing." "Listen, Susan. Asthmatics usually don't live long lives. And telling lies, is a sin. So, whom did you notify?" "Susan," cried Mrs. Maberley, "you treacherous creature. I remember now seeing you talking to a man by the fence. That is my own business. Suppose I told you I already know the man's name." Holmes said, "It was Barney Stockdale. Am I right? Why ask if you already know?" "I wasn't entirely certain, but I am now." "Susan, you could earn £10 right now if you tell us who is standing behind Barney Stockdale. A person who can pay 100 times more than you ever could." "Oh, such a wealthy man." "Ah, you laughed. So it is a woman? Well, since we have reached such fine details, surely it makes sense to name her and collect your £10. Go to the devil. Susan, watch your language. I'm leaving this house. I've had enough of you. I'll send for my things tomorrow." The servant girl dashed for the door. "Goodbye, Susan, and do take something for those nerves." As soon as the door slammed behind the infuriated woman, my friend continued, "Yes, the conspirators are quite serious. Consider the risky game they are playing. The postmark on your letter was 10 p.m. Susan reported it to Stockdale. He had to go for instructions to his employer, who, or rather, she, is devising the plan. I am inclined to believe it is a woman because of Susan's smirk when I made the mistake of saying, 'They hired Steve Dixie,' and by the very next morning, the former boxer was at my door to intimidate me. Fast work, wouldn't you say? But what do they want? That is the question. Who owned this house before you? A retired sea captain named Ferguson. Was there anything remarkable about him? Not that I am aware of. Could he have buried something here? True. These days people usually hide their treasures in a bank. But there are always eccentric characters in this world. Without them, life will be quite dull. That is why at first I thought of a buried hoard. However, that wouldn't explain why they need the furniture. You don't happen to have a Raphael painting or a first edition of Shakespeare hidden away, do you? I don't think I possess anything rarer than an 18th century tea service made in Derby. Well, that hardly seems enough to cause such mysterious events. Besides, why not simply ask for what they want? If they're so desperate for your tea service, it would be easier to offer a high price for it than to buy the entire estate. No, as I see it, you possess something of which you are entirely unaware, and something you would never part with willingly. It seems to me you are right, I intervened. If even Dr. Watson agrees, we shall settle on that version, said Holmes. But, Mr. Holmes, what could it possibly be? Our hostess asked. Let us attempt to discover it through the method of logical analysis. You have lived here for a year, I believe. Nearly 2. Precisely. And in all that time, no one has demanded anything of you. In the last 3 or 4 days, suddenly, these urgent offers appear. It seems to me there is but one possible conclusion, I said. The object they seek, whatever it may be, has only just arrived in this house. Mrs. Maberley, think carefully, Holmes said, leaning forward. Do you have any recently acquired possessions? I have bought absolutely nothing this year, she replied. Indeed? Then we must wait for further developments, while clarifying a few details. By the way, is your lawyer a reliable man? Oh, Mr. Sutro is quite dependable. And do you have any other servants besides the lovely Susan, who has just made such a dramatic exit through the front door? Yes, one young girl. Then you must attempt to persuade Mr. Sutro to spend a night or 2 here at the Three Gables. You may require protection. From whom? Who can say? The matter is still quite dark. Since we cannot yet determine what is being hunted, let us approach the problem from the other side. Did the real estate agent leave an address? No, only this card. Haynes Johnson, auctioneer and valuer. I doubt we shall find such a name in the directory, Holmes remarked. Honest men do not hide the addresses of their offices. I shall take up your case and see it through to the end. You may rest assured. Report any news to me immediately. As we were heading toward the exit, Holmes's eye, ever trained on the smallest detail, fell upon several trunks and suitcases piled in a corner of the hall. Milan, Lucerne, have these come from Italy? Those are Douglas's things, she replied. They haven't been unpacked? How long have they been here? They arrived only last week. Uh-huh, Holmes exclaimed. And you said, here is where the missing link may be hidden. How do you know there is nothing of value in them? There simply shouldn't be anything valuable there, Mr. Holmes. My poor son lived only on his salary. Where would he get expensive items on such a small annual income? And yet, Mrs. Maberley, we must not delay. Have Douglas's things moved into your bedroom and examine them as soon as possible. I shall return tomorrow to learn the results. There is no doubt that the villa was under close watch. As we passed through the gate of the high fence, the familiar figure of the boxer appeared as if out of the ground. His formidable presence in such a secluded spot looked particularly sinister, and Holmes instinctively slipped his hand into his pocket. Looking for a revolver, Massa Holmes? No, a bottle of perfume, Steve, Holmes replied coolly. You're a joker, Massa Holmes, ain't you? You won't find it funny, Steve, if you force me to look into your business. I warned you this morning. All right, Massa Holmes, having thought over your words, I don't wish to discuss that Perkins business anymore. Let's say Steve Dixie wouldn't mind helping Sherlock Holmes. Then answer me. Who is standing behind you in this matter? May I drop dead if I know? Massa Holmes. I'm telling the truth. My boss, Barney, just gave the orders, that's all. Enough. But remember, Steve, the lady living at the Three Gables and her property are under my protection. Do not forget it. All right, Massa Holmes. I'll remember. As we moved on, Holmes remarked, he is truly terrified for his own skin, Watson. I believe he would have given up his employer if he knew who it was. Fortunately, I know a thing or two about Spencer John's gang, and Dixie belongs to it. It seems to me, Doctor, that everything happening in Harrow is exactly within the jurisdiction of Langdale Pike. I'm going to see him right now. When I return, the situation should be somewhat clearer. I did not see Holmes again that day, but I could easily guess what my friend was doing. Langdale Pike was a living directory of all matters concerning social scandals. This strange, lethargic creature spent all his waking hours at a large window in a club on St. James's Street, serving as a human transmitter for every piece of gossip in England. It was said that Pike earned tens of thousands for articles supplied each week to the grimy gossip rags that serve a curious public. Whenever an unusual whirlpool or ripple appeared in the muddy depths of London life, it was registered on the surface with mechanical precision by Langdale Pike. Occasionally, Holmes provided Pike with useful information, and in return, Pike helped the famous detective. When I found my friend in his study the following morning, his manner suggested that our affairs were not going so badly after all. However, an unpleasant surprise awaited us in the form of a telegram. It read, "Come at once. Client's house robbed during the night. Police have begun investigation. Sutro." Holmes gave a low whistle. "The action has reached its climax, and much sooner than I expected. There is a powerful driving force behind this, Watson, and it is hardly surprising given the information I gathered from Pike. I made a blunder by not asking you, Doctor, to stand guard at the villa last night. The lawyer clearly failed to live up to expectations. Well, there is nothing for it but to head back to Harrow Weald." It was immediately apparent that, this time, the Three Gables differed greatly from the orderly home we had seen yesterday. A crowd of onlookers had gathered at the gates. 2 policemen were examining the windows and the flower beds of geraniums. Inside, we were met by a silver-haired elderly man who introduced himself as Mr. Sutro, the lawyer. Bustling about was a ruddy-faced inspector who greeted Holmes like an old acquaintance. "I don't think this case is for you, Mr. Holmes," the inspector said. "A most ordinary, straightforward burglary. Even the old-fashioned police are quite capable of solving it. No need for high-level specialists here. I am convinced the investigation is in capable hands," the famous detective replied. "So, a simple case of breaking and entering, you say?" "Exactly. We know perfectly well whose work this is and where to find the culprits. It was Barney Stockdale's gang. There's a Negro among them. They were seen in the vicinity." "Splendid. And what was stolen?" "The raiders' haul seems to have been small. Mrs. Maberley was drugged in the house. Ah, here is the lady herself. Our acquaintance from yesterday entered the room, leaning on the arm of a young maidservant. "You gave me sound advice, Mr. Holmes," Mrs. Maberley said with a bitter smile. "But, unfortunately, I did not follow it. I did not wish to trouble Mr. Sutro, and so I found myself completely defenseless. I was only informed of the incident this morning," the lawyer explained. "Mr. Holmes recommended inviting a friend to stay," she continued. I disregarded his experience and have paid the price. You look quite ill, Holmes began. Can you tell us what happened? It is all recorded here, the inspector interrupted, tapping a bulky notebook. And yet, if the lady is not too exhausted, believe me, I have almost nothing to tell. I have no doubt that Susan, the traitor, helped the robbers enter the house. They knew the layout of the rooms like the back of their hand. For a moment, I felt a wet cloth cover my face. I have no idea how long I lay unconscious. What did they take? Hardly anything of value could have disappeared. I am certain there was nothing of the sort in my son's trunks. Did the bandits leave no traces behind? Only a single sheet of paper. It was lying on the floor. It is covered in Douglas's handwriting. It's of little use to us, the inspector concluded. Now, if it had been the criminal's handwriting, that would be something. Undoubtedly, Holmes remarked. Unyielding common sense. And yet, I am curious to have a look. The inspector took a folded sheet from his notebook. I never pass by evidence, however slight, he said rather pompously. I advise you to do the same, Mr. Holmes. 25 years of experience has taught me that. There's always a chance of finding fingerprints or something else. Holmes began to examine the paper. What is your opinion, Inspector? In my view, this story resembles the ending of a strange novel. Yes, it may very well prove to be an unusual finale, Holmes remarked quietly. Did you notice the number at the top of the page? 245. And where are the other 244? I expect the burglars carried them off. A valuable trophy, no doubt. To break into a house with the intent of stealing such a manuscript is, at the very least, absurd. And does that not suggest any particular thought to you? I suppose that in their haste, the thieves simply grabbed the first thing that came at hand. Everything points to that. Let them rejoice in their loot. Apparently, finding nothing of value on the ground floor, they decided to try their luck upstairs. That is my version. And what do you think, Mr. Holmes? It requires a good deal of thought. Watson, come here to the window. When I stood beside Holmes, he read aloud what was written on the scrap of paper. The first sentence began as follows. Blood flowed down his face from the wounds of cuts and blows. But that was as nothing compared to the way his heart bled at the sight of that beautiful face, for which he had been prepared to sacrifice even his life. The woman laughed. Yes, one could have sworn by anything that she was indeed laughing, like a merciless demon, at the very moment he looked upon her. Instantly love died, and hate was born. For a man must live for something. If not for your affection, madam, then surely for my revenge, which shall bring you to your ruin. A curious treatment of grammatical forms, Holmes said with a chuckle, returning the paper to the inspector. Did you notice how his suddenly changed to my? The author became so carried away that at the critical moment, he placed himself in the hero's position. This scribbling seems dreadfully mediocre, said the inspector, tucking the leaf into his notebook. What? Are you leaving already, Mr. Holmes? I believe there is nothing more for me to do here, since the matter is being investigated so competently. By the way, Mrs. Maberley, I recall you mentioned a desire to travel. It has been a long dream of mine, Mr. Holmes. And where would you like to go? Cairo, Madeira, the Riviera? Oh, if only I had sufficient funds, I would take a trip around the world. Indeed, around the world. Well then, goodbye. It is not impossible that I may drop you a line this evening. As we passed the window, I noticed the inspector smirk and shake his head. His grin seemed to say, these clever fellows always have their little quirks. When we were once again immersed in the bustle of the city, Holmes spoke. Now our adventure approaches its final stage, Watson. I think we should bring the investigation to an end without delay. We stepped into a cab and hurried in the direction of Grosvenor Square. Holmes sank into deep thought. Then, as if suddenly waking, he remarked, "Watson, I hope everything is clear to you now." "I wouldn't say so. I only understand that we intend to visit the lady standing behind the events in Harrow." "Precisely. But surely the name Isadora Klein says something to you? A celebrated belle of society. There were few who could compare with her. A pure-blooded Spaniard, a direct heiress of the powerful conquistadors. Her ancestors ruled in Pernambuco. She married an elderly sugar king from Germany named Klein, and soon found herself the wealthiest and most attractive widow in the world. Then came the time for diversions. She had many suitors. Among them was Douglas Maberley, one of the most remarkable men in London. In all probability, for him, it was serious. No mere social butterfly, but a man strong and proud. He gave himself entirely to the feeling and demanded the same in return. But Isadora Klein was a true heroine of an old romance, a merciless beauty. So, the hero of our story is he himself. Ah, at last you are beginning to understand. I hear Isadora is about to marry the young Duke of Lomond. He is almost young enough to be her son. Her ladyship, his mother, might turn a blind eye to the age gap, but certainly not to a public scandal. Therefore, it became necessary. And here we are. We have arrived. The house was one of the most exquisite in the West End. The footman, moving like a well-oiled piece of machinery, took our cards and returned shortly to inform us that her ladyship was not at home. "We shall wait for her," Holmes replied cheerfully. The well-oiled machinery faltered. "Not at home means not for you," he stated flatly. "Excellent," said my friend. "In that case, we shall not have to waste time waiting. Be so kind as to give your mistress this note." He scribbled a few words on a leaf from his notebook, folded it, and handed it to the servant. "What did you write, Holmes?" I inquired. "A single phrase. Would you prefer the police? I think that should gain us entry." And so it did. A minute later, we were in a drawing room that resembled a scene from the Arabian Nights, vast and magnificent. A few rose-tinted lamps left the room in a soft twilight. One felt that Lady Klein had reached that stage of life where even the most defiant beauty begins to prefer a subdued light. From a small sofa rose a tall, majestic woman with a perfect figure and a lovely, mask-like face. The remarkable eyes of a Spaniard glared at us as if they wished to turn us to ash. How am I to understand this intrusion and these insulting insinuations? Isadora Klein exclaimed, brandishing the note. "Are explanations truly necessary, madam? I respect your intelligence too much to stoop to them, though I must admit these past few days have given me cause to doubt it. And why is that? Because, madam, you chose to frighten me with hired ruffians in an attempt to drive me from the case. However, you failed to consider one thing. A man chooses this profession precisely because he is attracted to danger. Thus, you yourself have compelled me to investigate the Maberley affair. I have no idea what you're talking about. What have I to do with bandits? Ah, then I did indeed overestimate your cleverness. Farewell. Wait, where are you going? To Scotland Yard. We had not reached halfway to the door before Isadora Klein caught up with us and seized my friend by the arm. In an instant, her steel-like hardness turned to velvet softness. "Gentlemen, let us discuss the situation. I feel I can speak frankly with you, Mr. Holmes. You give the impression of a true gentleman. A woman's instinct is unerring. I see friends in you. I shall not claim as much for myself yet, madam. Though I do not personify the law, I am, within the limits of my modest powers, a representative of justice. I am prepared to hear you out, after which I shall tell you how I intend to proceed. Oh, of course, the attempt to intimidate such a brave man was merely a foolishness on my part. But it was even more reckless of you, madam, to place yourself at the mercy of a gang of criminals who could blackmail you or even hand you over to the police. Oh no, I'm not so simple. Since I have promised to be sincere, I will tell you everything. Aside from Barney Stockdale and his wife, Susan, no one had the slightest idea whom they were working for. And as for those two, it is not the first time. Isadora Klein smiled with charming coquetry, as if at an old acquaintance. I see. They have already been tested by you. Yes, they are faithful hounds. You trust them in vain. Such creatures can bite the hand that feeds them. The Stockdales will certainly be arrested for their part in the robbery. The police are hunting them. They are prepared to take the punishment. That is what they are paid for. My name will not be mentioned in the affair, unless I find it necessary to do so. Oh no, gentlemen do not treat a lady's secrets in such a fashion. You must return the manuscript. Isadora Klein laughed and walked over to the fireplace, where a charred, black mass lay. Could you possibly have any use for this? She inquired. The woman standing before us with a defiant smirk looked bold, yet elegant and alluring. However, Holmes was not one to be swayed by his sentimentality. You have sealed your fate by that act, madam, Holmes said coldly. Your maneuvers were swift and precise, but now you have gone too far. Do not be so heartless, Mr. Holmes. I shall tell you the whole story. I believe I am quite capable of telling it myself by now. But try to see it through my eyes, Mr. Holmes. Try to understand the position of a woman whose highest ambitions are suddenly threatened with total ruin at the very last moment. Is it fair to blame her for trying to protect herself? Yes, Douglas was a fine young man, but he was entirely unsuited for my plans. He wanted to marry me. I could not afford to wed a man without a title or fortune. Because I was somewhat indulgent at first, Douglas imagined he could make claims upon me. It became unbearable, and in the end, I had to shatter his illusions by hiring ruffians to beat him senseless at your very door. Oh, you are indeed well informed. Yes, it is true, Mr. Holmes. Barney and his boys handled Douglas rather roughly, I admit. But what did Douglas do in revenge? Was that the act of a gentleman? He wrote a book depicting his own story. And, of course, he cast me as the predator and himself as the lamb. Everything was told there, though the names were changed. But would the truth have remained a secret to a single soul in London? What do you think, Mr. Holmes? He had every right to do it. The air of Italy seemed to go to his head and turn him ruthless. Douglas wrote me a letter and sent a copy of his work at the same time. He told me that one of the two copies was for me, and the other was for a publisher. How do you know that Douglas Maberley had not already carried out his threat? It was not difficult to identify the publisher. As far as I could discover, nothing had reached them from Italy. And then came Douglas's sudden death. I could not feel safe as long as another copy of that manuscript existed. I suspected it must be among the effects returned to his mother. So, my people went to work. Susan took a position as a maid in Mrs. Maberley's house. I intended to act fairly. Believe me, I did. I tried to buy the house and everything in it. I was prepared to pay any price she asked. But when the deal fell through, I had to resort to other means. There was no other way, Mr. Holmes. My entire future was at stake. Very well, said Holmes. I suppose, in this instance, We shall waive a criminal prosecution and demand compensation instead. What is the cost of a round-the-world trip in a first-class cabin? Isadora Klein looked at my friend in astonishment. Would £5,000 suffice? Amply, madam, I replied. And Holmes added, Excellent. You will write a check for that amount, and I shall see to it that Mrs. Maberley receives the funds. She has earned a change of scene. But one more thing, madam.